frankly, it reflects very badly on mainstream conservatives that Nigel has had to keep on coming out of retirement to fix things. Hats off to him, kudos to him. The sheer bravery and determination. He's rather like the Duracell bunny. I don't know if you remember the Duracell ads.
Yes.
Well, bunny, he keeps going, and
He
thank
does.
goodness he
And he
did.
has remarkable
The,
energy.
the key thing is that they return to the grassroots, to the ordinary people, to the ordinary folk of Middle England, the power to select their candidates as Conservative candidates. If you did that, you would lay the foundations of a Conservative revival. I mean, goodness knows Starmer's going to be one of the most unpopular men in British history in 12 months' time.
Breaking right now, Joe Biden will address the nation and the world from the Oval Office tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, where he will be seen in public for the first time since announcing he won't be running for president. So he is alive. But Douglas, this is so bizarre, everything that's been going on. And I want to show you this moment last night where he was calling in to a speech being given by the presumptive nominee Kamala Harris on an answer phone. Watch this.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And it is my great honor to have Joe's endorsement in this race.
You sure do.
I mean, Douglas, this is bizarre. Utterly bizarre. I mean, do we think Biden, because of his age and because he's clearly not well, has been struck down by COVID far more than most people? Or does he actually even have COVID? What do you think's going on?
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I think actually the obvious explanation is the true one. I think an elderly gentleman who should never have been endorsed as the candidate to run a second term has suddenly realized that he's not up to it. A lot of people around him have known this for some time. The media conspired to hide the fact from the American public. It became obvious in the presidential debates a couple of weeks ago that he's simply not up to the job. And he's left his party, the Democrats, in a terrible muddle as a result of this. They're now in a situation where they are having to choose someone pretty quickly. They've got a couple of weeks to formally choose who their candidate is going to be. It looks like it's going to be Kamala Harris. I suspect that actually it's going to be a catastrophe for the Democrat Party if they do run Kamala Harris. They'll go down to a sort of Walter Mondale style defeat. They will lose in states that they haven't lost for 20, 30 years. But frankly, it's a problem of their own making. If you're a party, particularly a party that's called the Democrat Party, you cannot allow a small clique to, in effect, sew these things up, stitch these things up. Yet, they should have had a proper, open, competitive primary contest. There should have been people in the upper echelons of the Democrat Party seriously questioning Biden's fitness to serve a second term. If they'd had this conversation 6 months ago, they could have chosen Jimmy Carter. Stands for a tradition of decent, honorable, patriotic Democrats in America. Where's that party gone? If they had this conversation 6 months ago, the Democrats could have found a candidate in the tradition of Jimmy Carter. Instead, they're lumbered with someone who, by Biden's own admission, was only ever given the job because of her immutable characteristics. You could call her a diversity hire. She's way out of her depth. I suspect she'd be way out of her depth in a bath. She's not capable, I think, of communicating effectively or articulating complex ideas. There are a comical series of memes on social media showing just how out of depth she is giving fairly straightforward speeches. But, frankly, the Democrats have only themselves to blame. They should have opened this process up 6 months ago and had an authentic search for a Jimmy Carter type figure. There are good, decent, patriotic Democrats out there. They just don't seem to be running the Democrat Party at the moment.
Douglas, speaking of those memes, I want to show you my favorite compilation of Kamala. And this is comparing Kamala as VP to the fictitious Veep, Selena Meyer, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus on the hilarious HBO series Veep. And unfortunately for the Dems, fiction and reality are pretty close. Have a look at this.
My fellow Americans, words have many meanings, and sometimes instead of conveying our meaning, they can suggest other meanings.
When we talk about the children of the community, they are children of the community.
Well, we are the United States of America because we are united. And we are states.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Whatever we have in store cannot be known. The past was once the future. The future is, I should say, unknown.
We got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously.
Obesity is a serious disease, and it needs to be taken seriously.
You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home.
I hope that clarifies the issue, and this can be the last word on those words.
Certain issues are just settled.
Clearly we're not.
No, that's right, and that's why I do believe that we are living, sadly, in real unsettled times.
I mean, you have to laugh, Douglas, but is that the best the Democrats have got?
She sounds like I do if I wake up and don't have breakfast and my blood sugars are low and I've struggled to put a sentence together. But sadly, this is the best the Democrats can do. It's tragic. It's awful.
Yeah, no, it really is. Look, Douglas, also breaking right now, major news. The Secret Service Chief, Kimberly Cheetle, has resigned after the obvious failures that saw Donald Trump almost killed in that assassination attempt. Obviously, this follows what was a catastrophic hearing for her on the Hill yesterday. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think she was in a pretty untenable position. I mean, there was a lot of grandstanding, which I don't think is particularly attractive of politicians who are out to just sort of demonize and vilify her. But putting that aside, I do think clearly her position was pretty untenable. I have to say, I think we need to be a little careful sometimes when talking about what happened. I don't think there were conspiracies. I don't think there was some sort of sinister plot. I think generally speaking, actually, most people who work for the Secret Service are professionals who try to do a difficult job, making split-second decisions. It's very difficult, I think, to do their job properly. I think we need to blame the people who maybe run the Secret Service, but I think some of the comments about what some of the rank and file members of the Secret Service do are just frankly a little ill-judged. Mercifully, the assassin did not succeed in killing Trump, although a bystander was killed. Obviously, there needs to be a really clear explanation as to exactly what the circumstances of the assassination attempt were. But I think some of the more outlandish conspiracy theories, I think we need to be a little bit wary of. They don't, there's a willingness when emotions are high to see plots and things. And I'm not sure that some of the conspiracy theories that I've heard over the past few days are really justified. Remember that this is the country that produced, great presidents. This is a country that's produced Ronald Reagan. Love him or hate him, Jimmy Carter was a good, decent president. I think maybe America perhaps needs to slightly take a step back over the events of the past few weeks and recognize that, yep, political passions are high. People feel really strongly about their team. But let's not think the worst of the other people in this country just because they happen to vote differently. America's been through some pretty tricky times. I think in the 1960s, during some of the civil rights riots and protests, people would have thought the country was coming apart. I think America needs a moment of calm. One of the things I hope is that the events of the past couple of weeks might lead some people in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party to recognize that by all means have a fierce presidential debate, but recognize that even Democrats, and if you're a Democrat, even Republicans are good, decent patriots too.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, Douglas, is that if there was no sense of an inside job and there was no conspiracy, as you call it, and actually this was down to incompetence, then I hope this is a massive wake-up call. in the same way that the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan was in 1981, because there was security failure after security failure here. I mean, why on earth was this guy allowed on the roof? Why was Trump allowed out on the stage knowing that there was some form of security threat in the air? Why did the Secret Service allow Trump to stand up and address the crowd? Because that's a big no-no. So I think, look, there needs to be a wake-up call, and thank God this wake-up call is coming with Trump still alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that you say is justified and valid. There does need to be an inquiry that asks why was it that the roof wasn't secured? Why were the decisions that were made? But, we also need to recognize that, sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes things are overlooked. It's not evidence of some murky conspiracy. I think one of the consequences of social media is that if you begin to slightly look for some evidence of some untoward hidden agency behind an event, it's easy to find often fake confirmation of that. And I think that leads people to be far more conspiratorially minded than is good for them, than is good for democracy. So I do just think, let's have an inquiry, put all the facts on the table, but let's do this in a sensible way. Mercifully, Donald Trump wasn't killed, but let's not look for conspiracies where there are none. That's just not good for America. I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if the assassin had killed Donald Trump? I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about. America would be in a major civil crisis. We don't want to turn up the heat on this. Let's remember on the day that Jimmy Carter died, the tradition of being able to disagree with people, but in a respectful way. The country that produced Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and even Bill Clinton is still here. Politics is important, but it shouldn't be a sort of proxy for religion through which we judge the moral worth of our fellow citizens.
But I've only promised to talk to you about products on this show that are actually life-changing. Now, this one, it's a bit more fun, a little bit more personal too, but the fellas watching, you'll completely get it. And if you're watching as a lady, then this is the perfect treat for your husband or boyfriend, which benefits you as well. Because the days of using the same trimmer for your face and the parts below are now over, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. So I've come up with the ultimate package to keep you trimmed from 12 to 6. So I'm going to tell you now about the Beard and Balls bundle, which features the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger. Great names, but not talking about this sort of lawnmower, folks. Because if your man has started to attack himself like an out-of-control lawnmower, you can stop him by getting precision trimming for all areas, even the sensitive ones, and get him as manicured as your freshly cut grass. So I'm talking about a trimmer for the moneymaker, another for the boys downstairs. This trimmer gets it right the first time, being gentle on the skin in all your delicate places. And let me tell you about the technology behind it. It's amazing. 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. You can choose between a precise trim or a smooth finish. And it's waterproof too, so you can trim in the shower. Next, I want to talk about the Beard Hedger. So this is perfect whether you're going for neat stubble or a full-on lumberjack type of look, because it's got a titanium-coated stainless steel T-blade, and this is what I love, 20 length options, which means you can achieve any style you want just by twisting the brilliant zoom wheel. Now, just like the lawnmower, the Beard Hedger is also waterproof, so you can handle your beard grooming right in the sink or shower without worrying about water damage. And with 60 minutes of runtime and an LED charge indicator, you'll never be caught mid-trim. With a dead battery, it's genuinely a gentle product. No more cuts. You'll keep your loved ones very happy and increase your confidence too if it's for you. Really good deal today. 20% off and free shipping. You just have to use the code outspoken.com. Use the code outspoken and do it at manscaped.com. Let me repeat myself. 20% off, free shipping. You use the code outspoken and just type it in at manscaped.com. No more juggling multiple tools or dealing with subpar results. Just efficient, effective grooming wherever you need it. For the premium grooming experience, trust Manscaped. I think one of the problems, though, Douglas, is that the MSM is so driven by complete and utter hatred of Donald Trump. I mean, I'll show you an example here. So in the UK, lots of the big broadcasters, because Trump survived, they seem to think this is all just a big joke. They haven't taken it seriously. So this is the LBC presenter, Sheila Fogarty. It was tracked down by the Guido Fawkes website. Watch this.
All the other channels.
How can the right-wing media be very small when Donald Trump only has to put a bandage on his ear to be given world attention?
Well, that's true, but that's in general media around the world, and it's generally, ironically, the left-wing media that supports that.
But it's the right-wing media that gives him most of his oxygen.
Well, it's not written media because there
in America.
I mean, come on, Douglas. He had a bandage on his ear because his ear was shot. And look at that response.
It's more than that, Dan. I mean, Donald Trump has been demonized by the left-wing media for years. And, I think there has to be some recognition that the demonization of Donald Trump has perhaps created the circumstances in which these sort of events unfold. There was some asinine British journalist, I think David Aranovich, who said something incredibly foolish and stupid on Twitter a few months ago.
He said Biden, it was 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks before the assassination attempt. And he said that Joe Biden should murder, his words, Trump, because he was a threat to national security. He later claimed that he was trying to make a joke in regards to the Supreme Court ruling. The BBC took no action against him.
I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly humorous about left-wing journalists demonizing their opponents. It creates a sense that their opponents are not legitimate, and I think that invites all sorts of unpleasantness. We see this in a very microscopic way when Nigel Farage during the general election campaign in my former constituency, Clacton, had a milkshake thrown over him. Now, no one was hurt, nothing particularly serious about that, but nonetheless unpleasant. And believe me, having been a UKIP MP and been on the receiving end of a mob, it can be rather unsettling. So I think perhaps there needs to be some acknowledgement by the left-wing media, the sort of people who spent years sneering and undermining and demonizing UKIP and now have tried to do the same to reform and have in America done something similar to Donald Trump. Needs to be some recognition that they need to take responsibility for the political climate that their demonization attacks create, and perhaps they might want to use this moment to take a step back and recognize that yes, they personally might not like MAGA, they personally might not wear a red hat, but people who do are good, decent, patriotic Americans. And they shouldn't be demonized for having views that they do about the southern border or about climate change or about the role of the federal government. I speak from the American South, where there are lots of good, decent people who hold views that are very, very different to the views that you would find in New England or Old England. We shouldn't demonize people for having these views that are different to us. And I think the left-wing media has done an awful lot to create a toxic political culture in the West. And I think now is the time for them to recognize that and take a step back.
Indeed it is. Now, look, you mentioned Nigel Farage. I don't know how to characterize your relationship these days. Maybe your old frenemy. But look, he gave his maiden speech in Parliament in the last couple of hours. Of course, as you say, he's now representing Clacton, which was the constituency you were elected in as the first ever UKIP MP. Of course, you had defected from the Conservative Party, but because you believe in democracy, you stood in a by-election and won, and then you won again there. So I want to talk about what's going on with Nigel, but have a look at his speech today.
What I perhaps didn't expect was to come here and to find that I'm more outnumbered with my reform team, more outnumbered here than we were in the European Parliament, because there are more supporters of Brexit in the European Parliament than I sense there are in this Parliament of 2024. This is very much a Remainers Parliament. I suspect in many cases it's really a Rejoiners Parliament.
He's right about that. isn't he, Douglas? What do you make of the fact that Nigel is now in Parliament as the Reform UK leader in your old seat?
Absolutely delighted. When Sunak called the election, I immediately sent a message to Nigel saying, you've got to run in Clacton, it'll be hilarious. He then hesitated for a while. I was absolutely thrilled when he decided to run, and I did everything I could to support him. I got a lovely message from him in the early hours of the morning on the day of the election saying, Clacton did it. And I said, Clacton did it and you did it. Well done. I'm really thrilled that he's in the House of Commons. And I think he's going to say things that frankly need to be said. The official Conservative Party is so moribund. It's been so taken over by the sort of Osborne Cameroon ascendancy. It's become such a sort of party full of DEI hires, frankly, because a lot of Conservative MPs were only parachuted into safe seats because of their immutable characteristics. That the official Conservative Party is so moribund. It requires an authentic Conservative voice like Nigel Farage, and I think he's going to be really bang on the money on a lot of things. He will be saying the things that need to be said. It's lovely seeing him standing exactly where I used to stand in the Commons and saying these things. And unlike me, when I was UKIP's only member of Parliament, he's got people alongside him from the same party, Reform. And that's, I think, if the official Conservative Party doesn't wake up pretty quickly, I think we'll see a lot more of Nigel, a lot more of Nigel's party, and about time too.
Well, look, I'm delighted that you two are friends again, because actually I think we all need to unite, and Nigel is the obvious person to unite behind when it comes to the right of British politics. But I do wonder, given you had difficult experiences working with Nigel when you were a UKIP MP, whether you share some sympathy for Ben Habib, who was the deputy leader of Reform UK, forced out by Nigel. I mean, is it possible for Nigel to work with others? Because that's going to be really critical, isn't it? Because Reform UK has to become much more than a personality vehicle for Nigel. And by the way, I say this as a former colleague of Nigel, and we never had any issues. We always got on very well, and I loved working with him. But there is a track record, you're one example of it, that it isn't always such smooth sailing.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I've had differences of opinion over Nigel. I happen to think that actually it was better to have a centre-right coalition that focused on a broad range of issues, spearhead the Vote Leave campaign, rather than some of the characters that Nigel wanted to run the Vote Leave campaign. And I happen to think that I was right on that and Nigel was wrong on that. We may still disagree on that, but I had differences of opinion with Nigel because I felt that if he did things his way, we would have lost. I think certainly that the way that he fought in South Thanet in the 2015 election, I think the fact that I won and he didn't win in South Thanet, again, it vindicated the approach that I was advocating rather than the approach he was advocating. There've been a number of differences of opinion. But these are tactical differences. On the fundamental issues, I agree with him. And I take my hat off to him because again and again and again, Nigel has had to come out of retirement. Remember, he didn't actually particularly want to stand in this recent election. He's had to come out, reform the band, and force the official Conservatives to do the right thing. And I think whether you, like me, have had differences of opinion with him on certain issues, we've expressed robustly different views on some things. The fact is that Nigel is a guy who's come out of retirement again and again, and by sheer grit and determination has done the right thing for the country. And thank goodness he's done it. Frankly, it reflects very badly on mainstream Conservatives that Nigel has had to keep on coming out of retirement to fix things. Hats off to him, kudos to him. The sheer bravery and determination. He's rather like the Duracell bunny. I don't know if you remember the Duracell ads.
Yes.
He keeps going, and thank goodness he.
And he has remarkable energy. Remarkable energy. And actually, on the front of the Daily Express today, he is predicting that there will be more Conservative MPs who defect to Reform. Specifically, there's a lot of attention at the moment, Douglas, around the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. And Farage said of her, there's a place for like-minded people, but is that what she wants? I've no idea. It's not my focus.
hats off to Nigel. I'm talking to you from the United States. The people that carried the Brexit baton during the referendum, Gove and Boris, are nowhere to be seen, having made a catastrophic error of inheriting that campaign and the fruits of that victory. Yet Nigel has carried on, and I won't hear a word against him. I think we owe him some respect for persistence and calling things right.
And so do you think that folk like Suella Braverman, I mean, look, she's going to try and run in the Conservative leadership contest, right? But actually, Patrick O'Flynn's done a really deep dive into the Conservative MPs in Parliament, and the vast majority of them are part of the sort of one nation woke set who want to go for a centrist leader like Tom Tugendhat, which is just going to be a complete disaster, right, for the party. So do you think if someone like Suella Braverman cannot end up leader of the Conservative Party because the MPs don't put her up for the members to vote on, then actually she would be better served and she would have more chance of success by defecting to Reform?
My gut instinct at the moment, and my advice to any Conservative MP watching this, is at the moment the share price of the Conservative Party is so low. Now's actually a good time to invest in the Conservative Party if you can nudge it in the right direction. And that means choosing a leader who's probably not going to be the next Prime Minister, but will be the rebuilder. And if you can invest in a Conservative Party that returns candidate selection back to local people. The original sin of the Cameroons was to, actually there are lots of sins of the Cameroons, but one of the original sins of the Cameroons was to centralize the selection of party candidates. And that basically created the Conservative Party turned itself into a vehicle for unprincipled, ambitious people in the mold of George Osborne to use it as a vehicle for their self-advancement in Westminster. If the Conservative Party chooses a good leader, whether they agree with you on this policy or that policy doesn't really matter. The key thing is that they return to the grassroots, to the ordinary people, to the ordinary folk of Middle England, the power to select their candidates as Conservative candidates. If you did that, you would lay the foundations of a Conservative revival. I mean, goodness knows Starmer's going to be one of the most unpopular men in British history in 12 months' time.
Well, I was going to ask you about this because today he's made another crazy decision when it comes to immigration. So we know he's scrapped the Rwanda scheme. Now he's scrapped the Bibi Stockholm barge, which was actually designed to stop putting out these tens of thousands of illegal migrants who are invading the Channel in expensive hotels. So this honeymoon period, it ain't going to last long, is it?
And he's got one of the lunatic Miliband brothers doing his best to deindustrialize Britain by making energy prices price the economy out of global markets. I mean, it's going to end in tears, and they're going to be bitter, bitter tears. What the Conservative Party needs to do, what the Conservative movement needs to do, is offer a credible Conservative alternative. There's going to be a huge opportunity to do that. Starmer's victory may be very broad, but it's incredibly shallow. If the Conservatives can choose a leader who doesn't lay out a manifesto for government, but fixes the defunct Conservative machinery, create a Conservative Party that is a democratic movement that allows ordinary members to choose their candidates in their counties, do that, and I think they will dramatically and rapidly recover against a Starmer government. In a sense, I think the British people are fed up with the Tweedledee and Tweedledum of politics, and the Conservative Party has been the Tweedledee to Labour's Tweedledum. If the Conservatives can choose a leader that creates an alternative to that, then I think they will come back incredibly quickly, and they will flourish and they will thrive. But Suella Braverman, I think, needs to talk to some of her colleagues. Are they serious about that? Or are a bunch of Cameroon-era chancellors going to carry on sinking the ship? We don't know.
I think it's the latter, unfortunately. But look, Douglas Carswell, such a pleasure to have you on Outspoken today. Loving your YouTube channel. I recommend everyone sign up to it as well for real sage analysis of politics on both sides of the Atlantic. And please do come back soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.